We are so lucky. We get to hear from the only Egyptologist in the Kansas City metro area today, Stacy Davidson. She holds a graduate degree in Near Eastern Studies, Egyptology from the University of Michigan, and has done archaeological fieldwork in Egypt, as well as worked in several museums in Berlin. This is actually going to be her second talk here at Oasis. So let's welcome her back to Kansas City Oasis. Where are you? Stacy Davidson.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? Is this, you doing well? Okay. Just have to set this up for a second and then we'll get started. Okay, and do I have the, yeah, one more thing. Ooh, that is the fastest clicker delivery I've ever had. Thank you. Woo, yeah, a round of applause, please. Woo, okay, yeah, relax. It's all right. Okay, Sawete, mihi nomen est Stacy Davidson. And don't worry, that's the end of my colloquial Latin for today. I just said hello to all of you, and my name is Stacy Davidson. I'm going to be speaking a bit today about your classical heritage. So in the scope of this talk, what that means is what we as English speakers have gathered from the languages of Greek and Latin. Because if you speak English, around 60% of your words come from Greek and Latin roots. And if you have any knowledge of scientific or technical terms, about 90% of those words are Greek and Latin derived. So you already know quite a bit of Greek and Latin, even if you didn't really know that you knew. So, the introduction here. I just have very minimal slides, so I tried to pick a Latin and Greek word to kind of go with what I was speaking with at the moment. So for introductions, we have introducere, to bring in or introduce. So that root is very easy to see how we got that in English. Arche in Greek is beginning or origin. So you probably want to know a little bit about me. I had a great introduction from Helen, but like, why am I talking to you? And what do I have to do with languages? Well, as Helen mentioned, I am an Egyptologist. So what that is someone who studies ancient Egypt. That's pretty much anything to do with ancient Egypt, including language, history, art, archaeology, religion, etc. And I'm it for Kansas City. So in the back, at the end of our session today, if you're interested, I do have some flyers about the classes that I offer in the area, and there are some free bookmarks with the name Kansas City and hieroglyphs on them. That's pretty rare and special and pretty cool, so go pick one of those up on your way out. So a little bit about me, a biography. This comes from two words, bios, meaning life, and grapho, meaning write. So if you've studied biology, you know that that's the study of life. So you can kind of see that connection working on here as well. So about me, I grew up in southern Illinois. And southern Illinois is known as Little Egypt. Yeah, scattered laughter, yes. May have had something to do with my chosen field. I'm not exactly sure. Of course, there were no pyramids and it was not a desert. But we did have names. Some of the town's names were Cairo, not Cairo, Karnak. There was a Thebes also. So these are all Egyptian names of Egyptian cities. That region actually is most known for both its past glory as a coal producer and also for its horrific gangland wars in the 20s and 30s. So if you've seen Boardwalk Empire, it was kind of like that except more rural. As you can kind of tell from that, that's not a great environment for a little girl who's interested in all things historical and ancient and cultural. So pretty much all I had was PBS, the local Carnegie Library, and a subscription to National Geographic. And that did me through until college. I went for a history degree. And after that, decided to go in graduate school for Egyptology. So this word, philology, this is bringing this all back to my love of languages. This is kind of a hobby as well as part of my profession. Philology is a word that comes from two Greek words, one philos, meaning love or affection, and the other logos, meaning word. So basically, when you say someone is a philologist, this is someone who studies text and literature and language. So again, thinking about that coal-producing gangland war area, not a lot of opportunities to learn ancient languages. But in high school, I finally did get the chance to take Latin. So this was my first foreign language. It has a very special place for me. Has anyone here taken Latin before? Yeah? Okay, so keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. How many people liked it? Keep your hands up if you liked it. Okay, that's actually many more than I was expecting. Who had a good Latin teacher? Okay, excellent. Who had the kind of stereotypical, very angry, very abrupt and curt Latin teacher? Yeah, there's always a couple of those. My Latin teacher was also the Spanish and French teacher because this was a very small school. She was nearing retirement and very frequently forgot which class she was teaching. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking. She would then yell at us for not answering her appropriately, and we're like, that's Spanish. I don't know. She also had a habit of, when we were translating, we would need to read aloud from the text and then translate that sentence in front of the class. So I remember most furiously kind of trying to count how many people it was until she got to me so I could kind of prepare if I knew what these words were or not. So it was a little bit of stress involved there, but I did enjoy it, and I was taking it at the same time in high school that I was taking a biology course, and it fit together so perfectly because in biology you're just memorizing all these terms all the time, but if you actually know what the terms mean, it really helps you out on the test. You know, you can instantly rule out at least two of those as not being even remotely close to possible. For example, when we did our frog dissection, we had the intestinal system of the frog, and the very last bit before everything comes out of the frog was called the cloaca. And I knew this from my Latin class. Cloaca means sewer. So that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy to remember. A slightly less gross story, botany, if you know Acer rubrum, which most people pronounce Acer rubrum, that's the red maple. And it's Acer because it's sharp, you have the sharp edges on the leaf, and rubrum because that comes from the word ruber, meaning red. So it's sharp red, basically. So that's easy to remember your different leaf shapes and your different names. And it's not just a hobby, it's not just something I like. I do actually use these languages in my profession. So for Egyptology, Latin is not really that important per se, but Greek is very important, and I've also studied that. Because most of the terms that we use to describe ancient Egypt, even the names of the pharaohs, are the Greek names. So this is like learning about the history of the United States using only what the Russians called us. I mean, that makes no sense. So you kind of have to be able to even peel back that layer of those Greek words, like pyramid is a Greek word, delta is a Greek word. Many of the towns' names, like Memphis, is the Greek form of the Egyptian town Men-Nefer. So I do use it. So I thought for kind of the way that the rest of this talk will go, kind of highlighting different areas in which Latin and Greek language knowledge might touch your life, and giving maybe an example or two about them. So the first one here is art. In Greek, it's techne. So we use the word tech or technical all the time, but when we use it, we're talking more about electronics, usually, or some sort of an engineering project, not necessarily art. We call art art, and that comes from the Latin word ars. So both of these can mean art, skill, or craft, or cunning of hand. So, I mean, just talking about this could be weeks worth of your time. So I'll just pick an example. And the example, has anyone heard of the myth of Prometheus? Ooh, I like talking to you guys. So Prometheus was a Titan. So he was, in Greek mythology, kind of in between the very first primordial deities and the Olympians in the time period. So the Titans were those great gods in between. And Prometheus, his name, it means forethought in Greek. So he was kind of the helper of humans, and he was actually, in some myths, the creator of mankind. What he did for us, according to the mythology, a couple different things. So for one, he set the precedent of animal offerings. So if anyone's familiar with many religions used to have animal sacrifice, and he made a trick so that the gods would accept the meat that people couldn't eat as their offering. So people could still have their nourishment and the gods could still get what they needed. But why he's more known and more infamously known is that he stole fire from Mount Olympus to give to people. So before that, not having the ability to light something at night, not having something to keep warm or cook food, that's a huge advancement for humanity. Of course, he was punished very severely for this. He was chained to a rock, and his liver was eaten out every day by an eagle. Yeah, but then it replenished at night, so there would be something left for the eagle for the next day. Yeah, I know, it's a sad story. But how that ties into some kind of an art or skill or craft is, does anyone know what the subtitle for Frankenstein is? Okay, we got 2 people in the back, yeah. So it's The Modern Prometheus is the subtitle for Frankenstein. So already, just by giving you her title and subtitle, Mary Shelley was telling you something about what her story was going to entail and what inspiration she was taking for it. Music. I know you guys love music, right? Yeah, we don't even need a show of hands for that. So the word music comes from musica, which means of the muses. So the muses were 9 goddesses. Each one had a different name and a different kind of aspect that she was in charge of. I won't read all of them, but I'll pick a couple out. The muse of history is Cleo, and her name means to make famous. That's quite fitting. We have Orania, who is the muse of astronomy. Her name means heavenly. So if you know the planet Uranus, that's a very similar root for that, heavenly. Maybe the most interesting in translation is the muse of tragedy. Her name is Melpomene, and it means one that is melodious. So tragedy being melodious or something beautiful is slightly interesting. History. This is a word that we get almost exactly from both Latin and Greek. So historia or historia. And actually the original meaning was more of a story or a narrative. So in history, we're thinking, well, history just encompasses everything that happened in the past. And history is written by the victors, right? So in Greek tradition, has anyone heard of Persia, the Persian Empire? Yeah? Okay, I need to come back more often. I love you guys. Okay, so what we knew about the Persians came from the writings of the Greeks, and the Greeks were the enemies of the Persians. So again, this is like learning about the history of a whole culture by what their enemies said about them. Can you imagine that? I mean, just think about these political ads that we have right now, and if that was what you thought was the truth of everybody in the world. So Persia, we didn't have the ability to read their language, so all of what we knew from them came from the Greek sources, many of which were very propagandistic, as well as just being plain wrong. And propaganda comes from the Latin word propagare, for to spread or to propagate. But Persia was the largest empire in the world at that time. It had a pony express, it had a post office, it had tolerance for the different peoples under its rule. that probably not as bad as what the Greeks made them out to be. Okay, do we have some math people in the room? Couple, yeah, math, engineering, yeah, okay. So, mathematics comes ultimately from the Greek word manthano, meaning to learn, understand, or comprehend. And we have the Islamic world, actually, to thank for a lot of what we know about the ancients and their study of math and science. The early geometry from the Greeks, these things were all preserved in Baghdad and other areas in the Islamic world in about 9th, 10th centuries CE. Many of the words that we have for mathematics actually still come just from the Arabic words like algebra or algorithm. These are Arabic words. So in Baghdad, which, today we would not really think this, but it used to be really the world center for education and learning and science and medicine. They had something called the House of Wisdom, and this was the premier place to learn all of these things. And this happened in the 9th century CE. They preserved many different cultures' texts, the Greeks, the Indians, the Persians, and studied all sorts of different topics like alchemy, chemistry, engineering, geography, astronomy, math, etc. Something else that many people don't know is that this school at this time in this culture also admitted women. And it admitted people who were not Muslim. So really a kind of cosmopolitan intellectual center, and unfortunately that didn't last. Science. Any scientists in the room? Yeah? Okay. So science comes from the Latin word scientia, meaning knowledge or skill. So kind of like techne, we're still speaking about very specific skill sets and what to do with them. So a few things. Does anyone remember their periodic table? A little bit. I know at least one person in this room knows that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Raise your hand high. Remember when you were studying the different symbols and that some of them just didn't make sense? Like, you see the English word and then the symbol was some completely different letters that didn't have anything to do with it. Like silver. Silver's symbol is AG. Like, where does that come from? Well, it's just the Latin word for silver. Argentum is silver. The same with gold. Gold is aurum in Latin, so we have the AU abbreviation. Iron was also a really funny one. And lead as well. So lead was plumbum, so you get the PB. And we also have, as I said before, like 90% of our scientific words come from Latin and Greek. But things like atom, that means something indivisible. Laboratory is a place to work. So now you can go home and call your home office your laboratory. Yeah. Okay, religion. I will not belabor this point because I know all of us in here have studied a lot about religions. We believe that the word comes from the Latin religo, to tie up or to bind. So that's kind of an interesting origin, right? Yeah, so why you think this might be important to study Greek and Latin and Hebrew is that when you're reading things in translation, doesn't matter if it's religiously based or not, or literature or poetry, if it's in translation, you already have at least one level of separation between you and what the author intended. So if you know the original languages and you know what those words meant to those people at those times, you can make up your own decisions about that. For example, I have two words, angel and demon. So angel comes from angelos, meaning a messenger or envoy. Demon, originally, you say demon today and you get very weird stares. Originally, this did not have any connotation of being good or bad. Daimon was a god or goddess or spirit or soul, or it could be good fortune or bad fortune. There's actually another word, eudaimonia, which is prosperity or happiness. So even having that root in there clearly was not a negative thing to the ancient Greeks, but eventually over time, we were using these words, they get kind of far apart from what their original meanings were. If you are enthusiastic, as some of you might be about Latin and Greek, I don't know, you look kind of quiet. If you are enthusiastic, that comes from the root of en and theos, meaning there's a God within. That's the original meaning of that term in the Greek. So now to bring it to something a little closer to home, a little bit about America. So if you can take out your wallets, and don't worry, this is not a shakedown. If you still carry money, and you have a $1 bill, take a look at the back of your $1 bill. So we'll have these two symbols on the back of your dollar bill. And there are, if you look really closely, a lot of Latin phrases on the back of your dollar bill. So the first one, a pluribus unum, which we know means from or out of many. So that is kind of a phrase used to describe our country. We think this is inspired by the Roman poet Virgil, who lived about 70 BCE to about 19 BCE. It's not an exact quote. The closest we can get to what his quote was is actually in a section describing a salad. So he's basically giving you a recipe and telling you to mix things up, and then eventually the color, out of many colors, you get one color. The second phrase on here, annuit keptis, approved of undertakings. All three of these come from Virgil, by the way. That is from an allusion to the Aeneid. Has anyone read the Aeneid before? This is kind of the epic poem for the Roman culture, kind of response to Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, because Aeneas actually was a Trojan from the Trojan War who had his own Odyssey all around the Mediterranean, eventually landing in Italy, fighting with some people there, and founding Rome. So this is kind of Rome's founding mythology story. The last one, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, again comes from Virgil. This is in a section talking about the birth of a boy who will become divine and rule the world. So that's all on our mind. Why do you think we have so many Latin quotes on our money? We're kind of looking back to Rome here. Many of the founding fathers had a classical education. They knew Latin and Greek and many other languages. There were 12 presidents who had fluency in Latin. There were 8 presidents who knew Greek. There was one president, James Garfield, who was said to have been able to take a pencil in each hand and write Latin and Greek simultaneously with both hands. I really wish we had video of that. Oops, we'll go back one. So the preamble to the Constitution. I'll read it for you. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Okay, that's kind of familiar. We might have to think back a little bit, but we've all heard that one before. Let me read it to you again, having taken out the Latin-based words. We the, of the, to, a more, for the, welfare and, the blessings of, to ourselves and our, do, and, this, for the, of. So definitely we would lose something in translation if we did not have our Latin derivatives in the English language. And just a couple points to leave you with, because I can't leave you without addressing some of these things that get so horribly butchered in English today. So these all come from Greek and Latin. The top one is kind of like my big soapbox. If I ever hear people do this, I have to comment. I know it's rude, I just have to do it. So the first one, if you've graduated from something, if you are a woman, you are an alumna. If you're a group of women, you're alumni. So it has the AE ending. That's pronounced as an I in Latin. The second line down here, if you're a man and you graduated, you're an alumnus with a US. And if you are a group of men or a mixed group, then you're alumni. So everybody pronounces that second line ALUMNI. Everybody says alumni. You're only talking about women graduates. There are no guys. A few funny spellings in English. When we make the word crisis, plural, we make it crises. This comes from the Greek way to make something plural. Also, the last 3 points on here, we have datum and data. So usually we all just say data for everything, but if you only have one, it really is a datum. Museums, technically, we should be saying musea instead of museums, but nobody does that, or they sound pompous. The same with stadium and stadia. So that was a unit of length in Rome. So I hope that this end of Greek and Latin etymological fun stuff will help you go out and at least think about a little more how you use English, what you're actually saying when you do it, or maybe even just learn some Greek and Latin, because it's fun. So carpite linguas, seize the languages. I had to put the first word in a plural form. So you might know the phrase carpe diem, which is seize the day. That's only talking to one person. So I can't just tell one person to go seize some languages. So I had to say carpite linguas, seize the languages. And again, if you're interested in any potential classes I have a flyer in the back. I have some free bookmarks for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope you are encouraged to learn a little bit more about language, whichever language that is.
Do you have time for Q&A? Are you interested if we have any questions?
Yeah, we can.
Are you
Yeah, if anyone has, or I can wait in the back if they want that too. Yeah.
Do we have anyone who'd like to ask a question? Yeah.
Well, apparently, if we wanted to read the Bible in the original language of Aramaic, it would be Aramaic, correct? In the New Testament?
Depends on, okay, you mean like the whole Christian Bible?
The New Testament, I'm thinking,
okay,
was written in Aramaic.
New Testament, that's actually a very good point that I forgot to make. The New Testament is largely written in Koine Greek, which is a version of Greek. So when I was studying in school, my advisor told me I had to study Greek. So of course I went for Attic Greek, which is kind of the philosophical, historical, classical phase of Greek. And because my advisor was not very helpful, after I got done with the 2 years, he says, oh, you should have taken the Koine Greek. It's so much easier. So Koine Greek is different from the classical Greek in that it does have some simplification of grammar, and also some of the words are changed. Like when we saw the angel and demon, that's at that phase of Greek, we're starting to get the transition to what those mean today for us. There are some portions in Aramaic, but those are just the speech of Jesus, quotes. But mostly you would need to learn New Testament or Koine Greek if you wanted to read the New Testament in the original.
Part two of question, what relationship does Aramaic have to these classical languages you've been talking about?
Okay, so Aramaic is closer to Hebrew. So Hebrew is a Semitic language, as is Arabic. So you would need to be familiar with the lettering. So the lettering is going to be much closer to the Hebrew letters. It's not going to really have anything to do with the Greek letters. Yeah, you're welcome.
I lived in Southern Illinois just for like a brief minute, and there
I'm
was a little,
sorry, and
Yeah.
hi.
Hello. And I remember the Lake of Egypt down there,
Yes.
and Cairo and all that.
Yes.
I never understood, not being from there, why it was Lake of Egypt. Why there were all of. Do you know the history
Yeah.
behind that?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. We don't know exactly when that happened. There is a theory that they were trying to get more people to settle, and because it's at the confluence of where the Ohio and the Mississippi meet, it had a very fertile area for growing crops. So they were trying to make it sound better to people, to get them to come out there. That's kind of the best guess we have as to why that kind of happened. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay.
So if you were interested in learning more about ancient languages, would you have any recommendations about the best way of going about that?
Well, it depends on which languages. As far as Kansas City is concerned, it is somewhat difficult. Are you interested in Latin or Greek or just anything or Greek? Yeah, we don't. I teach at Johnson County Community College. I guess I forgot to say that, but we don't have a Greek class right now. Generally, in order to get ancient language knowledge in an area like this that doesn't have a lot of major university departments, you kind of have to go to churches and synagogues and things like that, which, might be okay, but yeah. We can talk after. I can see if I can help you a little more.
That was my answer. The Greek Orthodox churches around here do Greek, and there is a church in Johnson County that does Latin, and I know the synagogue does Hebrew too. So, being a homeschooler, we know all about this.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. And then we'll make this the last question here.
This is more of a comment than a question. I don't know if many of you know, but Linda Hall Library has a collection of old books.
Yes.
And some of them are kept in a
Special.
very special environment. And I went there some time back because I found out about it, so I asked to see books about Galileo and Newton. I thought that'd be really cool because I'm an engineer, it'd be really cool to see that stuff. They're written in Latin.
Yes.
They'd be no good.
Yes.
At least I know they're there, so. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Stacy.
you.
Another round of applause.
Thank you.